Is it going? It's going. I understand that the best way to deal with a large amount of information and make it real, one needs to have questions to answer. Could you please find all the major axiomatic reference points in our conversation and turn them into relevant educational questions that would engage an audience? No, I'm not reading all of that. Hurry up.
Certainly. Here are some educational questions based on the key points from our discussion. Historical context and background. 1. What were the major factors leading to the escalation of the Ukraine-Russia conflict? 2. How did the fall of the Soviet Union contribute to the current Ukraine-Russia tensions? 3. What role did Vladimir Putin's rise to power play in shaping Russia's foreign policy towards Ukraine? Specific events and developments. 4. What was the significance of the 2014 annexation of Crimea by Russia? 5. How has the 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia impacted global geopolitics? 6. What were the immediate and long-term responses of New Zealand to the 2022 invasion of Ukraine? International relations and responses. 7. How has New Zealand's foreign policy evolved in response to the Ukraine-Russia conflict? 8. What are the differences between multilateral sanctions and autonomous sanctions, and how has New Zealand utilized them? 9. How has New Zealand balanced its relations with major powers like the United States and China in the context of the Ukraine conflict? Political and economic implications. 10. What are the potential economic impacts on New Zealand from the Ukraine-Russia conflict? 11. How do international sanctions on Russia affect global trade and New Zealand's economy? Humanitarian and legal aspects. 12. What humanitarian aid has New Zealand provided to Ukraine since the conflict began? 13. What legal mechanisms exist internationally to hold Russia accountable for actions in Ukraine, and how does New Zealand support these efforts? Public perception and myths. 14. What are some common myths or urban legends related to Russia and New Zealand, such as the story of Putin living in Karori, and what is their significance? 15. How do public perceptions and media narratives shape understanding of the Ukraine-Russia conflict in New Zealand and globally? Geopolitical impact. 16. What are the broader implications of the Ukraine-Russia conflict for small nations like New Zealand in terms of international diplomacy and security? 17. How does the conflict between Ukraine and Russia illustrate the shifting dynamics of East-West relations in the 21st century? These questions aim to engage an audience by encouraging them to explore the historical context, specific events, international relations, economic implications, humanitarian aspects, and broader geopolitical impacts of the Ukraine-Russia conflict and New Zealand's responses.
Some of those questions seem ever so complicated it would only be fair to the audience, those who are bothering to engage with the video, that the answers to the questions you have posed actually have the answer in the text. Are you sure that that is the case? And it's at the bottom. Here we go.
You're right. It's important that the questions are clear and that the answers can be found within the text we've discussed. Here are simplified and directly relevant questions, ensuring the answers are embedded in our previous conversation. 1. What were the major factors leading to the Ukraine-Russia conflict? 2. How did Vladimir Putin's rise to power influence Russia's actions towards Ukraine? 3. What was the significance of the 2014 annexation of Crimea by Russia? 4. How has New Zealand responded to Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine? 5. What are autonomous sanctions, and how has New Zealand utilized them in response to the Ukraine crisis? 6. How has New Zealand balanced its relations with the U.S. and China in the context of the Ukraine conflict? 7. What humanitarian aid has New Zealand provided? Yes, I understand your pedagogical rationale. You aim to create questions that directly relate to the content discussed, ensuring that the answers are accessible and clear within the text provided. This approach helps engage the audience effectively by simplifying complex topics and making sure that anyone engaging with the video can find and understand the answers easily. This method ensures clarity and enhances learning by connecting questions directly to the provided information.
It makes people think, which is impotent. Yeah. I also consider it part of the Socratic method. Unfortunately, I think it would have been a good idea to maybe even have started with a vocab induction. Time is potentially money, though, and it would certainly bloat the time frame periodization of the ensuing YouTube video.
Engaging people through thought-provoking questions is indeed essential, and incorporating vocabulary induction at the beginning of your video can be valuable for understanding. However, balancing depth with brevity is crucial to keep the audience's attention. Here's a streamlined approach. Vocabulary induction. 1. Annexation, the action of seizing territory. 2. Sanctions, penalties imposed by one country on another. 3. Autonomous, acting independently or having the freedom to do so. Simplified Socratic questions. 1. What led to the Ukraine-Russia conflict? 2. How did Putin's rise affect Russia's policy towards Ukraine? 3. What was the impact of Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014? 4. How has New Zealand responded to Russia's actions in 2022? 5. What are autonomous sanctions, and how has New Zealand used them? 6. How does New Zealand balance relations with the US and China amid the Ukraine conflict? 7. What humanitarian aid has New Zealand provided? As of early June 2024, significant developments in the Ukraine war include Ukraine's use of US-supplied HIMARS missiles to strike Russian air defenses, marking an escalation in the conflict. The country has also suffered severe power outages due to Russian attacks on its energy infrastructure, losing 50% of its electricity generation capacity. Internationally, Ukraine is receiving substantial support. The Netherlands is investing 400 million euros in combat vehicles, and the US has announced a $225 million aid package focused on reconstructing Ukraine's power grid. Additionally, Ukraine is progressing towards EU accession talks, having completed necessary reforms. Sources: Al Jazeera, Telegraph, Ukrinform.
What? Something happened today. Where's the bottom? Here it is.
Today, June 8th, 2024, several significant events have occurred in the Ukraine war. Ukraine has launched its first attack using US-supplied HIMARS missiles on Russian territory, marking a notable escalation. Additionally, the conflict continues to severely impact global food supplies due to the blockade of Ukrainian grain exports from Black Sea ports, leading to rising food prices worldwide. Today, June 8th, 2024, there has been a significant development in Ukraine involving the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, leading to catastrophic flooding. The flooding has severely impacted the Kherson region, displacing thousands of residents and causing extensive damage to homes and infrastructure. Reports indicate that the dam's breach resulted in water levels peaking at 5.6 meters in some areas, submerging entire neighborhoods and causing an environmental disaster with oil pollution in the floodwaters. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has condemned the attack, attributing it to the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam has led to significant flooding in the Kherson region, and both Ukraine and Russia are blaming each other for the incident. Ukrainian authorities have accused Russian forces of deliberately destroying the dam to cause widespread devastation and hinder Ukrainian advances. On the other hand, Russian officials claim that Ukrainian forces targeted the dam to disrupt Russian defensive positions. The flooding has caused severe humanitarian and environmental crises, with thousands of people displaced, homes submerged, and significant damage to infrastructure. The international community is closely monitoring the situation, and there are calls for independent. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia has deep roots, stemming from historical, political, and territorial disputes. Here are the key reasons for the ongoing war. 1. Historical context. Ukraine and Russia share a long history, with Ukraine being part of the Russian Empire and later the Soviet Union until its dissolution in 1991. Ukraine's independence was followed by a period of political and economic turmoil, during which it sought to establish its own national identity and political alliances separate from Russia. 2. 2014 Crimea annexation and Donbass conflict. The current conflict began in earnest in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea following a disputed referendum. This move was widely condemned by the international community. Concurrently, pro-Russian separatists, with alleged support from Russia, took control of parts of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions in eastern Ukraine, leading to an ongoing war that has resulted in thousands of deaths and displaced persons. 12 source. 19 mark source. 3. Geopolitical tensions. Ukraine's efforts to strengthen ties with the West, particularly its pursuit of membership in the European Union and NATO, have been major points of contention. Russia perceives these moves as threats to its sphere of influence and national security. NATO's expansion eastward has been a consistent source of friction between Russia and Western countries. Number 4. Cultural and linguistic divides. Ukraine is divided culturally and linguistically, with the western part of the country leaning more towards Europe, and the eastern part having stronger historical and cultural ties to Russia. This division has been exploited in the conflict, with narratives of protecting ethnic Russians and Russian speakers used by Moscow to justify its actions. 5. Resource and strategic interests. The region is economically significant, with valuable resources and strategic military importance. Control over Ukraine's Black Sea ports and energy resources has also played a role in the conflict dynamics. 12 source, 20 lack source. 6. Current invasion. The war escalated dramatically in February 2022, when Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This invasion was justified by Russia on the grounds of demilitarizing and denazifying Ukraine, claims widely dismissed as unfounded by Ukraine and the international community. The invasion has led to significant destruction, a humanitarian crisis, and broad international condemnation and sanctions against Russia. These factors combined create a complex and volatile situation that has led to the ongoing war, with both sides entrenched in their positions and the conflict showing no signs of a quick resolution. 19 source, 20 source, 18 damn source.
I swear to goodness this can be bloody. Oh God. 1. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia is rooted in a complex interplay of historical, political, and geopolitical factors. 1. Historical context. How much is this? God, it's so boring. Historical context. Ukraine and Russia have shared histories, especially during the period when Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire. Blah, blah, blah. 2014. I swear it's just repeating itself, and I'm not really convinced there's anything. Blah, blah. These elements combined create a complex and protracted conflict that continues to evolve, with both sides entrenched in their positions and the international community heavily involved in efforts to mediate and provide humanitarian aids. When I put 1, I was expecting you to elaborate with more useful detail about the historical context. You seem to have just repeated what was given in the last section. Blah, 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 so boring. So intensely boring. Oh my God. Oh, do I have to read it myself? Do I? Oh my God.
Certainly. Here is a more detailed exploration of the historical context that has contributed to the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Historical context. Early history. Kievan Rus. The origins of both Ukrainian and Russian statehood can be traced back to the medieval state of Kievan Rus. 9th, 13th centuries, which is considered a cultural and political predecessor of modern Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, was the center of this state. Mongol invasion and fragmentation. The Mongol invasion in the 13th century led to the fragmentation of Kiev and Rus. While the territories of modern Ukraine eventually came under the control of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and later the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the northeastern parts evolved into the Grand Duchy of Moscow, which laid the foundations for the modern Russian state. Union with Poland and the Cossack era. Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Significant parts of Ukraine were integrated into the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth from the 14th to the 17th centuries. During this period, Ukrainian territories experienced significant Polish cultural and political influence. Cossack Hetmanate. In the mid-17th century, the Cossacks, a group of semi-military communities living in what is now Ukraine, established a semi-autonomous state known as the Cossack Hetmanate. The Treaty of Pereyaslav in 1654 saw the Cossacks seeking protection from the Russian Tsar, which led to the gradual integration of Ukrainian territories into the Russian Empire. Russian and Soviet rule. Imperial Russia. By the late 18th century, most Ukrainian lands were fully integrated into the Russian Empire, following a series of military campaigns and partitions of Poland. During this period, Ukrainian culture and language were suppressed in favor of Russification policies. Soviet Union. After a brief period of independence following World War I, Ukraine was incorporated into the Soviet Union in 1922. Under Soviet rule, Ukraine suffered greatly, notably during the Holodomor, 1932 to 1933, a man-made famine that resulted in the deaths of millions of Ukrainians. World War II further devastated the region, but it also led to the incorporation of Western Ukrainian territories into the Soviet Union. Modern independence and tensions. Independence in 1991. With the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, Ukraine declared its independence. The early years of independence were marked by economic struggles and political instability. Orange Revolution. In 2004, the Orange Revolution was a series of protests and political events that took place after a disputed presidential election. The movement favored closer ties with the West and opposed the pro-Russian candidate Viktor Yanukovych. Euromaidan and 2014 crisis. In 2013 to 2014, the Euromaidan protests erupted in response to President Yanukovych's decision to suspend the signing of an association agreement with the European Union in favor of closer ties with Russia. These protests led to Yanukovych's ousting. In response, Russia annexed Crimea in March 2014 and supported separatist movements in the eastern Ukrainian regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, leading to an ongoing conflict. Full-scale invasion in 2022. In February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine.